Thank you very much. I think history has been rather cruel to us, and we have been too kind to the people who have denied us our history. As a people, we have always been hospitable to strangers. Anytime you want to find the strongest thing about a people, look on the flip side and you'll find the weakest. The strongest thing about African people is their ability to accept other people without examination and to be hospitable toward other people without asking their intentions. The weakest thing about African people is their universal political naivete in relationship to the intentions of other people. Because in all the world, none of the visitors have been their friends. In class, just to make it simple, I developed an approach to this. It angered most of the people. I said that there are three personality types in the world. The sand people from Western Asia, Arab types, bastardized what's left over from the human waste matter, the Romans, the Greeks, the Indo-Europeans, the old Babylonians, the human waste matter that once was the civilization of the Tigris and the Euphrates, all came together now under a common name called Arab, the sand people. The Africans, the sun people. And the Europeans, the ice people. I maintain that the chemistry of these three personalities wasn't supposed to mix. Each one in their respective habitat could have gotten along, but together there is trouble. Sand don't mix with sun, and ice don't mix with anything. The sand people and the ice people have one intention in mind. They have never changed one iota. And their intention remains the same no matter what their ideology and no matter what their religion. Their intention remains the same: to dominate by any means necessary. I have been a socialist most of my life, and I will die one. And when I'm talking about socialism, I'm not thinking about something we cooked up in Europe. I'm talking about the kind of social living that existed in human societies long before there was a Europe. The European concept confused the issue. The European concept of Christianity confused the issue and negated Christianity. Organized religion negated spirituality. Spirituality was then and still is man's greatest need. Man did not commercialize Christianity. I recently read a dissertation written by a Ghanaian at Syracuse University, 1932, on why African religions never became world religions. No collection plate. No piping. No bishop with all these robes to support. If you can't commercialize it, what good is it to Europe? Can't build any great temple. The priest was the property of the people. The priest wanted anything, the people gave it to him. So what you need with money? You want to go someplace, the people take you. You could never get rich in a religion like that. All you could get is your keeps. So if you got any kind of other intention, you chose the wrong one. Now we're going to talk about Columbus a little, and using Columbus as a takeoff in the classroom. I once had a question on the exam, and it stayed there until the students caught on and began to answer the question too easily. The question is that of the three events that happened in 1492, there are two other events more significant to African people, directly relating to African people, more significant than the alleged discovery. Name those events and tell me the effects of the reverberation of those same events today. I had reduced 1492 to insignificance. I had poo-pooed world, the discovery of the new world, because it's going to be done by the Portuguese anyway. Then what other events am I talking about that's so significant? 1492, the Africans, the Arabs, and the Berbers lost control of Spain. The Africans and the Arabs, who had been controlling Spain since 711 A.D., began to quarrel among themselves, and they lost control. The European who had been pinned into Europe, feeding on Europe since the fall of the Roman Empire, now had an outlet to the sea. He now began to look beyond Europe. And so 1492 not only represents a rebirth in European nationalism, a European consciousness of his color. Remember now, prior to 1492, the rise of the slave trade, the encounter with black and brown people, there was no such thing as a white people, a black people, a brown people, a yellow people, because people were not identified in that way. So this would set in motion the color coding of people that would later reflect in the bastardization of African people away from home, that subsequently was set in motion the color coding in Brazil, Jamaica, and in Haiti. That's its reflection for today. The other event inside Africa itself, after more than 1,000 years of independent state building, while Europe was going through its dark ages, Africa was going through an age of great enlightenment. And this age of great enlightenment would last 150 years into the slave trade period. You think slavery starting on the West Coast, in inner Africa, you've got independent states with universities, great scholars, great libraries, Africans operating on all kinds of medical discoveries in inner Africa. You got coastal Africa with great cities in eastern Africa, concurrent with the Arab slave trade that existed for 1,000 years before the European slave trade. All of this in the whole period of 1492. You think that's the only thing that was happening? Then I'm showing you that 1492 was a contradiction and an accident. What did Spain do during that period? It began to ask some questions about its color, its whiteness. It began to expel the Moors. It began to expel the Arabs, the Moors, and the Berbers. Then it looked around at their super clerks, the grandees, the Sephardic Jews, and who were the money managers of Spain, and began to expel them. Spain was whitening up. What did this mean? The Spanish did not consider the Jews white people. This is not our consideration now. This is not our classification. We never classified anybody. So all classifications were done by European people. Certain things now are set in motion. I'm going to deal with Christopher Columbus, but what is the preface to Christopher Columbus? I say that Europe has an uncanny genius of draining the disease pulse of its political sores on the lands of other people. I'm saying that is what Europe is ready to do right now, because the disease has been built up in the body politics of Europe. It has to go someplace. And it has to drain off unwanted population, unwanted political ideas on the land of other people. How long can Europe dump its garbage on other people? It's human garbage, it's political garbage. They have failed as Christians, but Christianity hasn't failed, the Christians have failed. Communists hadn't failed, the communists have failed. There's nothing basically wrong with communism. There's something basically wrong with those who are handling it. Because no matter what the European handles, it's going to be racist. Racism does not stop at the door of communism and socialism. One of the things when the African was handling it in the form of communalism, he was totally non-racist and not suspect of people coming from the outside, not even suspect enough to protect himself. The African had no awareness of where Europe had been coming from, had no awareness of how this disease pulse had been building in the body politic of Europe. Around the 10th century, in the 11th century, the Catholic Church now in control of Europe, really the main decision-making apparatus in Europe. In order to get money for the luxurious life of the priests and the monks, and to build all those castles and big churches, they had drained the people. Finally, they invented something called purgatory. An intermediate stop-off place before you can get to heaven. Grandma is not in heaven. She had to stop off in purgatory. So you got to pray her from purgatory into heaven, and the more money you give the church, the harder I'll pray for her. It was a spiritual sticker. Religion has always been a political instrument to them. It's a spiritual instrument to you. This is why when you found an independent church, you also found an independent approach to religion. It means different things to different people, different feelings. The minute it fails to serve them and keeping them in power, they're going to throw it into the ash can of history. Forget about it. Now, my point is that in the midst of this build up and the people catching on to the tricks of the church, and the Pope discovering that sooner or later the people might turn on the church, a beatnik, Peter the Hermit, came across Europe talking about the infidel Arabs, barring them from going to the Holy Land, see the Holy Grail. Now people got their attention directed toward rescuing the Holy Grail that wasn't lost in the first place. It may not have been holy. Now they're taking their mind off the church. The church has got something to turn people's attention away from destroying it for all the games, all the con games the church has been playing on. So everybody started marching across Europe to rescue the Holy Grail. Not only march across to steal the farmer's products, his cows, in the name of God, steal his daughter in the name of God. Every lady over 10 was violated. Now, if you think this has something to do with religion, you're misreading history. You should read a good book on the Crusades. Now, these Crusades would give Europe a drain off. When the pin-up against the church came again, they had Martin Luther to give them another drain off. I'm saying Martin Luther, who broke away from the church, almost saved it because he gave people an alternative. Instead of destroying it, some people walked away from it. And some people criticized it and stayed in it. Now, after all of this, Europe discovered that it still was hungry, land poor, people poor, and resource poor. Famine had taken 1/3 of the population of Europe. Europe had lost the concept of longitude and latitude. If they put a ship out to sea, they wouldn't know how to turn it, east from west. The Africans and the Arabs at the University of Salamanca in Spain had preserved the maritime information coming out of China, then the leading maritime nation of the world and the leading technical nation of the world of that day. The Europeans would learn this information and turn on those who preserved it forward. Talking about an end grade, there's one. Now, with this information barely soaked in, a catch of maps would fall into the hands of Prince Henrik of Portugal, called Henry the Navigator, although there is no information to prove he ever went to sea. He would start schools of chart making and map making in Portugal. Into this school would come a little-known Italian, Spanish, or whoever, Cristobal Colon, later known as Christopher Columbus. He would say in his diary, as man and boy, I sailed up and down the Guinea coast for 23 years. Subtract 23 years from 1492, what do you get? The Guinea coast is West Africa. He was in the early Portuguese slave trade. Now, I know you're going to step high on Monday. Celebrate his birthday better than Portuguese. To read his diary. Read Eric Williams' analysis of the diary in a book called Documents on West Indian History. Read Eric Williams' period. A whole lot of people, especially people from Trinidad, don't read Eric Williams because they were not too pleased with his political handling of Trinidad. I don't think this should prejudice you against reading because he's one of the finest historians to come out of the Caribbean areas in this century. Now, I don't know enough about how he handled Trinidad. I knew him at Howard University as a professor of political science. And just before independence, when he had to write a history of Trinidad and Tobago, he said he did it in 2 months, and I read his book, and it was correct. There wasn't an error in it. The man was downright brilliant. And dining at the United Nations, he was, kind of one of those soft, handsome, cuddly types. He was telling me, John, would anybody believe, I can't imitate an English accent. Would anybody believe that you and I used to pursue some of the same ladies? is a southern drawl. Would anybody believe that I won sometime? But I'm saying, I think the first 3 chapters of his Capitalism and Slavery is the best analysis of the beginning of the so-called New World, the slavery issue, and what the Columbus myth set in motion that should be found in print. The 3rd chapter, which deals specifically with slavery, how and why it caught, need to be read with some depth of seriousness. Michael Bradley has written a book, The Columbus Conspiracy. I've written a long analytical introduction to the book. I'm sorry the publisher didn't get it out at this time. It would have been a golden opportunity for sale. But he maintains that he found so much dirt on Christopher Columbus. He thinks there must have been 2 different men under the name, because no one man could have been capable of all this dirt. Christopher Columbus, one of the great myths in history, the phoniest of all Western heroes, right, a fantasized thug, the forerunner of the mafia type, who discovered absolutely nothing. And when you look at what is behind Columbus, the atmosphere behind him, the gradual awakening of Europe losing sentimental attachment to itself, and losing sentimental attachment to other people, and thinking it has a right to take what it wants and needs from other people. We have to look at some neglected dates in history. Look at 1400s. Europe is beginning to rise. The Africans, the Arabs, and the Berbers are still controlling Spain and the Mediterranean. The Africans in Africa, the Songhai Empire is on its rise, the last of the great nation-states in Africa. Africa is not in decline. Nearly all African states were intact when they fell. They did not fall because of internal differences. They fell because they had an external enemy that they could not deal with, because they did not suspect that enemy. You think African states, because they were internally corrupt and all, fighting and all. Africa is the worst state right now than it was 500 years ago. African nations and people are in a worse state right now than they were 500 years ago. The European educated African might, in the final analysis, be Africa's greatest enemy. We might have to throw him out of Africa to free Africa. That's another lecture. I'll deliver it one day when I can run for my life. 1415, the Portuguese captures a little enclave called Ceuta in Morocco. Someone said it's about the size of Central Park, and I went there, and it's not as big as Central Park. But this made the European know that there was a possibility he could invade the land that he feared and get a victory. 1450, the Africans and the Arabs began an argument among themselves, and over half of Spain was lost. The Castilian side of Spain, that boasted they had no Moorish blood, which is a lie, began to plot. 1455, they had enough independence to go to Rome with the Portuguese, who had freed themselves from the domination of the Africans in the Arabs in 1240, and began to bargain for territory. The Pope would tell both of them, you are both authorized to reduce to servitude all infidel people. The Pope had sanctioned the slave trade. There was a contract called the Isiento. You could not engage in the business without this contract. England was in a swing position between Protestantism and Catholicism. England could not get the contract. When Henry VIII came to power, he built the Church of England. Now, you might want to be proud of belonging to the Church of England, but the foundation of the Church of England was based on the hot sexual passions of Henry VIII. He wanted to do some women in. He wanted to change them when he wanted to. He wanted to chop one's head off, and he did. And she became Elizabeth I, who led England into the slave trade. Captain Hawkins and her good ship, Jesus. That's the name of the ship. His coat of arms with two black people bound, hands back to back, tied together. Now, 1482, a neglected day, the Portuguese went into Ghana, then called the Gold Coast. They insisted on building permanent fortifications. The King Asa, in his beautiful speech, would tell them that he has done honorable trade with them in commodities and made sure their ships were loaded properly. They were doing commodity trade, not slave trade. He said, in previous trips you have complained about our weather. Now you come here dressed like the God who made night and day, wanted to settle permanently in our land. Maybe if we see each other infrequently, we can maintain our friendship. He wouldn't buy the Bible story, so he had to buy the gun story. And he had no guns. They moved into his country, built Elmina Castle. Elmina, the mine, the largest of the slave trading posts on West Africa. Its dungeons can hold nearly 2,000 slaves at one time. Built a community around the slave force through the cohabitation with African women. You see the bastardization that starts on the coast of Africa even before the African leaves the country. It will continue on the ships. It will continue on the plantation. It will give us a problem we haven't even faced up even to this day. Not only the bastardization of the body, but the bastardization of the mind. The important thing about this item is that a little known sailor later Christopher Columbus, was supposed to be in this exposition. Now, how then did he emerge in 1492, this man who never had a command position, how did he emerge as admiral of somebody's ocean seas when he didn't even have a petty officer job before that? What kind of connections did he have? Who financed the ship? Isabel didn't have that kind of jewelry. She hawked all of her jewelry, wouldn't even buy anchor for a ship. It was a stick-up. The grandees, the money men, the Jewish bankers, give me your money or into the Inquisition. She would force into being a concept. Some of the Jews were converted to Catholicism. They became what they call Merinos, or the silent Jews. Catholic by day, Jews by night. Some of their descendants still exist. And some of them still associate themselves directly or indirectly with the Catholic Church. The outstanding descendant of those groups that you know of, Fidel Castro. You thought he was one? All right. If I didn't have the information, I wouldn't be talking about it. The whole book was published in France, dealing with his lineage, traces right back to the silent Jews of Spain. He tells everybody he's Castilian. All right, if that's what he wanted to say. Most of the Jews in Spain were Sephardic Jews. The Jews who took over from the Sephardic Jews were Ashkenazi Jews, or the white Jews of Europe. When they got expelled, many of them went to Holland to find the Dutch East Indian, the Dutch West India Company that set up South Africa. You're always looking for friends. You overcount your friends, you undercount your enemies. Got a mirror? Look in the mirror. Look in the mirror. You find your first friend. Find your revolutionist. Find your Messiah. You find your leader. Find your theoretician. That's where you start. You find somebody else that looks like the person in the mirror, or relate to the person in the mirror. And now you got a whole army. You're on your way, about to change your world. Solely because you made up your mind you're going to change yourself. Nothing turns until you make up your mind you're going to change yourself. How much is it worth? What are you willing to put on the line in order to change yourself so you can change the world? What are you willing to claim? What did we lose? At the beginning of these 500 years, Professor Van Sertima said that for 500 years our history has been locked into a room. This is what the whole fight over curricula is about. You take our history out of that room, when we tell the truth about ourselves, then the truth about other people will have to become known. We have to stop calling ourselves lazy. No lazy people would have survived this kind of Holocaust and still been alive. For 300 years, white people on our welfare. We were their welfare check. We worked for them for nothing. And if you can't get your economy going with 300 years of somebody's labor, then you sure must be done. And that's the biggest welfare cheat ever. The very few people on welfare wouldn't settle for a decent job. And yet, people come into the country, including some of our people, buy all this job, but they are lazy. They got their own welfare. A lot of us who need welfare can't even get on welfare. A lot of us who deserve welfare can't get on welfare. My family never been on welfare, not because they don't deserve it, but because they get so much flack from other members of the family. There's certain codes we go by, certain things we say and try to live up to. One of the things I heard very early when I accidentally drank some corn liquor and got drunk and ended up in my grandmother's feather bed, and men said that, boy, you got to know one thing in this family. We can handle our liquor and our bimmer. They handle that liquor very well. As for women, the women did most of the handling. That includes me. Now let's get serious, because I feel the Baptist preacher in me coming out, and I got to catch an airplane early in the morning and go down to Columbia, South Carolina, do a little preaching and lecturing. So I got to go home and investigate a bed sometime. The main thing I was going to say as an aftermath of the Christopher Columbus myth, that was the wholesale murder and misunderstanding of the indigenous Americans, mistakenly called Indians. He was headed for the East Indies and ended up in the West Indies and started calling the people Indians. As a result of the wholesale destruction, he would ask Father de las Casas to go to Rome and ask permission to increase the African slave trade. The Africans replaced the indigenous Americans. Father de las Casas, considered the first historian of the New World, would write a book on this. He endorsed the bringing of the Africans to save the Indians. Near the end of his life, he said slavery was wrong for both the African and the Indian, but this was 35 years later now. Too late to do anything. You should seriously read Father de las Casas, the disruption of the Indies. I don't think Caribbean people read enough Caribbean history. I think they celebrate and congratulate themselves so much, and they really don't know the history. And I don't think the black American knows the history, the struggle of the black American. I don't think the Africans know too much about the struggle of the Africans against colonialism. For 100 years, African so-called chiefs went to the field with shield and spear, and I was general, some of the finest generals of Europe. And these generals wrote books about it. And one of the finest of these books was written by a young reporter named Winston Churchill. It's called The River War, dealing with the fight in the Sudan. One of the finest pieces of reporting since Caesar came home from Gaul. My main point here is that what Christopher Columbus set in motion was the disruption of a continent, almost the depopulation of a continent, the changing of the structure of a people's way of life, that it will never be the same again. He was no hero to us, he was a thug. If indigenous people cared to write, he would be the greatest villain in human history. And if the Africans wrote a book about him, he would also be one of the greatest villains in human history. This is why the fight is against the correct curriculum. I'm not going to talk about Afrocentric anything, because I don't believe in compromising with the word African. It's either African-centric or it's nothing. I think the African-centric people are Johnny-come-latelys. They're young, they're enthusiastic, they're terribly egotistic. They're doing a magnificent thing in a terrible way. They're leaving too many people out of consideration. To write a whole curriculum on Afrocentricity and leave out Martin Delaney. Right. To say Du Bois was not African-centric. To leave out William Wells Brown. To leave out the black preacher craving for a definition of Ethiopia, all the books written by black religious people on the Ethiopian origins of our faith and our history, to leave that out? To leave out the African components in our early poets? To leave out Elaine Wilkins Harper's beautiful call, "Bury me not in a land where men are slaves." These young people don't know nothing. When were they born? The first African-centric curricula was, in recent years, was Wilson Huggins, A Guide to the Study and Teaching of African History, written in the Old Harlem History Club. In my early days in New York, I was 19. I know it's hard on your imagination, but I was a teenager once. Just like the rest of you, I had to go through it. To write about African centricity and forget that great cadre of Caribbean scholars, J. E. Rogers, who called our attention to the role of the African personality in human history, Charles C. Seifert, who called our attention to the African contribution to the concept of the brotherhood of man, Raphael Powell, who the first to debunk the word Negro, Richard Moore, stubborn as a snake sometimes, but still a great scholar. Blyden, and not to read a scholar whose concept of African redemption was just as good as Marcus Garvey, but much clearer in many ways. Hubert Harrison, to leave them out of the concept of Afrocentricity and to call yourself the father of it without any understanding of these roots of it, and to not to understand that the revolutions against what Christopher Columbus set in motion started in the Caribbean islands. That first revolution we have a good record of was in Cuba, 1527. Christopher Columbus, act of criminality, set in motion revolutions throughout the Caribbean islands in South America that culminated in Haiti becoming an independent state. One of the main reasons why Haiti is in a sorry state today is that the United States do not intend for a progressive African state to exist any place on the face of this earth. Tragically, they've destabilized most of Africa, or bought off its leaders. Mercedes-Benz, Scotch, cognac, European women, miseducation. Ghana is a nation of Jesus freaks. Nigeria is a den of thieves. Could have been one of the great industrial nations of the world because it had everything. Everything you need to make a great industrial nation. Am I talking away from the subject? Well, yes, I am, and yes and no. What we lost with the crisis set in motion by Christopher Columbus was the concept of the state. We are fighting to be assistants to people who are not worthy of ruling the state. We have lost too much from our historical memory. The European nation state will never succeed in Africa. This is why you've got imitation European states in the Caribbean. You've got imitation European states throughout Africa. What the Africa needs in order to breathe properly, politically, is the territorial state. A vast state, all southern Africa, be one vast territorial state. I don't mean a single state as in Africa need to lose its sovereignty. I mean all of them should combine themselves into an economic union, a cultural union. They could have 5 big universities to take care of all of them, and smaller universities in each state. They could have a better high school system. They could have a better hydroelectric system. They could have a shipping system. We have to stop being trained to be assistant to someone and trained to be all of it. What did we do before you got here? We had to make a principled decision. We might have to step back in order to step forward. I'll wear no shoes until I make shoes. So we might have to do without shoes for a little while. I'll have no more cornflakes sent from Michigan. I'll buy the machine that makes the cornflakes grow my own corn, make my own cornflakes. If I want cornflakes, or if I need cornflakes. Now, anybody with a stove can make a potato chip, so we're not even discussing that. I'm saying what we lost in that transition of those 500 years, self-confidence in the image of God as we originally conceived him or her to be. Once we get back that concept, once we give that confidence in ourselves, turn off some of the televisions, talk to our children, realize that they have to be trained from birth for leadership. You are put on this earth to be a master of the earth. I will accept nothing from you less than the best, and I will give nothing to you less than my best. And once we put all of this together, we as a people will get our spirit back, our confidence back, and straighten up and be on the road that will lead us back home. Thank you very much.